Hello and welcome to another episode of Armenian American Perspective. I'm Martin Harutyunyan, filling in today for Grigori Aghnukyan, and this is a bi-weekly program that we have exploring the issues concerning Armenia and Armenian Americans in particular. And today we have a special edition. We're gonna have an additional program today because of the current situation of the things that are developing in Armenia. And our guest is live from Yerevan, Garo Yevnukyan. Garo Yevnukyan is an Armenian American from New York, now living in Armenia with his family for a number of years now. He is an attorney and an entrepreneur. Garo, welcome to Armenian American Perspective.
Thank you. Welcome.
Um,
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Yes, happy Easter to everybody. Today is Easter, and we
And your birthday.
thank you. Yes.
Happy birthday
Um,
too.
thank you. So, the reason why we're having this special edition is last week we were speaking with Dr. Vahe Gasparyan, and a lot of things happened uh, immediately following that program. So, um, of course, we'd like to know more about you, Caro, but before we get to that, if you could just fill us in about what happened since last Saturday.
Uh, well, since last Saturday, I guess we're talking about the event that happened on Sunday with the three individuals who went into the police station. That's what we're talking about, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Those three individuals are associated with the National Democratic Alliance as far as being supporters. As you know, National Democratic Alliance is a movement to differentiate it from a political party. A movement is a loosely organized, or we can even say not organized entity. A movement has an idea, a goal, and people get around that movement because they share the same goal. What differentiates a movement from a party you have membership. In a movement, you don't have membership, you have affiliates, you have supporters, but they're not members. And the difference between a member and an affiliate or a supporter is that a member pays dues and a member takes some kind of an oath in a political party to support their bylaws, the constitution of the organization, so on and so forth. And they also subject themselves to the authority of the political party, where the political party leadership or their designated group decides whether a certain member of a party has gone overboard with their rules and regulations and whether that particular member deserves to be punished. As you know, within the diasporan Armenian organizations, there are three classical Armenian parties. You know, the Dashnakhtutun ARF, there's the Hınçakyans, the Social Democrats, and of course the Ramgavars, which are the conservative party. Now, all those political parties have the same rules as far as their membership is concerned and how far. I'm going into a lot of detail so our listeners could understand the background. For example, ARF, they have in the past and throughout their 100 and something year history have punished certain members, evicted them, denied them of their membership because they did not abide by the party's rules. That's because the bureau or some other body of the party decides on conduct and what a member could say or do. So in that respect, the National Democratic Alliance being a movement, and I am a board member of that movement, we do not tell our followers or supporters as the form of conduct as to what they can do or what they can say. And as such, a movement always is more fluid than a political party. Political party is more constrained, more rigid. A movement, people come in and they leave. In different times of the movement, some people may agree with the ideology, so they come into the movement, but then they may not agree with the methods on how to reach that ideology or the goal, and they may leave the movement. So coming back to on Sunday, this is the background information. Those three people who went into the police station with grenades were affiliates or supporters of National Democratic Alliance. Now, that's as far as that. And the question is, why did they go on Sunday into the police station, and what were their demands? And this is where it's very important, because this is where we make a distinction whether there are rebels or are they terrorists. And we have to make that distinction too. And there are, besides being very fine lines between a rebel and a terrorist, there is also very obvious lines which are not very fine, which are very rigid and very clear. And in this case, those are clear lines, not fine. So we don't have any thoughts as to what group would they belong to. So coming back to what caused them to go to the police station and what were their demands. On that day and prior to that, the authorities, Nikol Pashinyan's government, has threatened and actually delivered on their threat that they will not allow people to conjugate at Tavush, Voskepar, the area there, because that's the area that Nikol Pashinyan unilaterally, or we can say with Aliyev's demand and Nikol Pashinyan's unilateral decision, he wants to give those 4 areas, and I'm being careful here, not saying villages, I'm saying areas, because it's a lot more than a village. It's the surrounding pastures and surrounding areas, and a very strategic and very important area for Armenia, and not just for Armenia as far as land is concerned. It's important for Armenia's survival. I want to make that distinction. So it's not just 10,000 square meters or whatever certain land or pastures or forest. It's a strategic area in which Armenia's survival depends on that area. So obviously there was a lot of pushback on that from the Armenian population, especially those Armenians who had served in the army, who had participated in the wars with Azerbaijan, because those are the guys who actually spilled their blood for that land, which is Armenia, which is Armenian, has been Armenian, and always will be Armenian. So Nikol Pashinyan unilaterally wants to give this land away to Azeris, because Aliyev demanded it from him, and because he's threatening the Armenian population at large, that if he doesn't give those 4 geographic areas to Azerbaijan, then there is an imminent danger of war starting. Not only imminent danger, he even said it may start in a few days. By the way, those few days have gone by and the war has not started, just for your information. So he threatened or terrorized the Armenian population with a threat of war if he doesn't give those lands away. And of course, as I said, the Armenian people and especially those who had served in the army, who fought the wars, be it the first Artsakh War or the 44-day war, they revolted, so to speak, in a very civilized way. They went to that area to have a physical presence to prevent Nikol Pashinyan's treasonous moves of surrendering land to Azerbaijan. In other words, they went there to prevent it with their bodies. And I want to emphasize this, that not one single person who went to Tavush, to that area, was armed or threatened physical violence towards anyone. So what did Nikol Pashinyan do? Nikol Pashinyan arrested on that day Martakan Yekhpayrutun. There is such an organization which
Military Brotherhood.
Military Brotherhood. These are all people who had served in the army or served or fought the wars, and they were the vanguard, so to speak, of the resistance, popular resistance of against the Nikol Pashinyan's government for their move to give those lands. So they were arrested. Not only were they arrested in Tavush, because Tavush is a couple of hours away from Yerevan, but they were also arrested in Yerevan before they could leave their house. In other words, the national security services and the police and detectives, everybody was up in arms, so to speak, in Yerevan, and they would round up people right from their houses, from their cars, before they could even go. And about 50 people were arrested from the Brotherhood, Military Brotherhood. Is that how you translate it?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. And also 8 NDA, National Democratic Alliance supporters were arrested. So these 3 individuals, in a form of protest, they went into the police station in Newark and demanded, this is their demand, they demanded that all those people who were arrested to be released so they can go to Tavush and they can defend the land, so to speak. And in their demand, which is also very important, they told the police to stay away, keep your distance. I'm saying in a few different ways. In Armenian, they said, keep away, keep your distance. And what's also very important, one of those individuals, one of those 3 said, guys, referring to the police, we're going to blow ourselves up, not you. So that's why keep away so you don't get injured. So this is you would describe this as self-sacrifice to send a message. I want to remind our friends, our listeners, that the Arab Revolution that occurred, it started in Tunisia. And if those who don't remember, in Tunisia, a street merchant who was harassed by the police set himself on fire, and that started the whole Arab Revolution.
Now, wasn't there a recent similar event in Yerevan?
That's right. That's right. There was a similar event in Yerevan, and if I'm not mistaken, that individual is a scientist who wanted to set himself on fire. He dosed himself with gasoline. The police were able to carry him away before he could strike a match, so to speak. So yes, and we have to understand that when times are not normal, you can expect to have abnormal reactions. And the abnormal reactions in not normal times is actually normal. Because, you know, that's the correlation. It's abnormal, so you have an abnormal reaction. And this is what happened. I'm not justifying their act because I personally am against self-sacrifice. If it's up to me, I'd rather take away 10 Turks before I kill myself. So that's my point of view as far as self-sacrifice is concerned. Yes, I will sacrifice myself in different ways, but not with my life. Now, these guys did that. Now, that's an extreme expression of resistance. That's what those guys were doing. They were resisting the government oppression against people's free will, free speech, and freedom of movement. What gives them the right to tell anyone that you can't go from one location to the other? There is no such law. There is no war situation. There's no it's no curfew. So an Armenian citizen is free to move. But of course, we know why they're doing this, because they want to surrender those areas unhindered. They don't want to have any troubles. They don't want the Armenian people to object to it. So that's as far as those individuals are concerned. Now, I know those three individuals, two of them very well, one of them not as well, but I know of him. One of them, Artur, forgot his last name now. Artur has fought in the first war, in the 80s, 90s, and also he fought in the 44-day war. His son was a conscript, an 18-year-old, during the 44-day war. His son was killed during that war. He was in Artsakh with his son, of course, in different locations. When they brought his son over to Yerevan, to the morgue, Artur had to identify his body. Artur came from Artsakh, interrupted his war efforts, and came, recognized or identified his son, and he went back. Now, I want you to look at this now and answer my question. Is that normal? I'm a father. I have a son too. I don't think I would do that. I think I would stay and I would bury my son before I go back or before I do anything else. But Artur was not that type. Artur said, my son's friends need my help in Artsakh. He referring to the other 18-year-olds who were in the same battalion or unit that his son was in. So he went there. Again, this is to show the self-sacrifice of the person. Now, not everyone is able or even thinks of doing the self-sacrifice in that manner. So Artur did that. The other person that I know very well, and he's also a co-defendant with me in the Sasna Tsrer case that still goes on for the 8th year already. And most people don't know that the Sasna Tsrers, the daredevils of Sasun, that their cases are still in court, because most people think that since Nikol Pashinyan came to power and toppled Serge Sarkisyan's regime in 2018, that the Sasna Tsrer's defendants were all free. That's far from the truth. Not only we are not free, but there is a lien on all our property, real estate or disposable property, cars and such like that. So I can't sell a car, I can't sell my house, I can't even repair my house because the city hall will not give me a permission because there's a lien on my house from the government because of the
and just to clarify something, you weren't an armed insurrectionist.
No, I wasn't. I was put away, and interestingly enough, it's being repeated again. I was put away 2 days after the revolt or the insurrection, and it was on the 19th of July 2016. 2 days later, and there's a specific reason why I was arrested because I defunct or I took apart the government's attempt to label Sasna Tsrer as terrorists. And I'll get to that, but before I do that, I want to return to Vartkes, the other co-defendant with me. Vartkes is a professional military man. He served, he not only fought in the First War, he fought in the 44-day war. He has been in the army, if I'm not mistaken, for 25 years. He retired from the army, from being a rank and file officer, only about a month ago. So for 25 years, he served in the Armenian army as an officer. And he served in a very, very dangerous area, which is near the area that he was going into, which is north of Sevan, which is the closest area to the border with Azerbaijan. We have a very narrow sleeve of land between northern part of Sevan Lake and Azerbaijani border, and that's where he was serving. Anyway, coming back to this whole, and this is what I want to tie in with that, my arrest in 2016, now we are seeing a demonization of National Democratic Alliance, where immediately all the government talking heads and their media, and as you know, in Armenia, the media is controlled by two groups. You can lump them together as one because they're all against National Democratic Alliance in that respect. That's what they have in common. But if we have to divide them into two categories, one category is quote unquote pro-government, government-controlled media, such as the public TV, public radio, plus a number of TV stations owned by oligarchs that are loyal to the Nikol Pashinyan. That's on one end. On the other end, you have the so-called past leaders, or the fifth column, as they call it in Armenia, which are represented by at least two of the figureheads, Serge Sarkisyan and Robert Kocharian, and of course, all their associates. And their associates are many. They own many TV stations. Serge Sarkisyan's son-in-law, which in Armenia called Mishik. Mishik owns Armenia and a number of other TV stations. So the whole media is monopolized. So here you had the media, government officials, parliamentarians, pro-government parliamentarians, immediately coming out and labeling this act as a terroristic act. Now, the law requires that someone is innocent until proven guilty, and that proof is only when there is a court judgment. Not only there is no court judgment, a judge has not designated the act as a terroristic act or those people as terrorists, but there has not even been an official claim by the prosecutor saying that the charges against those people are for terrorist acts. And the reason why it's not a terroristic act, because in order for it to be labeled as a terrorism, there need to be a few things. Number one, there has to be a threat. That threat has to be either a very viable threat, which is imminent to occur, or on the other hand, even though the person who is making the threat was just kidding, let's say, but the person who hears the threat, this joking threat, takes it seriously, that is also considered terrorism, with one exception. And in a US legal system, they call that exception the eggshell theory. In other words, if you're so sensitive that if I scream in your ear and you get terrorized by that, and then the judge has to look into your mental state to determine whether you are under normal circumstances, would a normal person be terrorized? And if they find that you didn't act normally, you have an eggshell as a nerves, then it would not be considered terrorism. But the intent, that's why let's forget about this joking thing, let's go to the serious one. There has to be an intent to terrorize. Now, intent to terrorize has to be very clearly expressed. It cannot be a convoluted thing. It has to be very clear. And the other people who hear it, they must be terrorized. So if you have a grenade in your hand, and by the way, let's not forget that these people, why did I give that background? I didn't talk about the third person. The third guy is a younger guy, also fought in the 44-day war. He had a few concussions during the war. And I don't know if you know the results of the concussion is that sometimes your nerves are on the edge. So these people know how to use a grenade. They've used it many times successfully against the enemy. So if they wanted to terrorize the police with that grenade, or if they wanted to injure, because the injury, see, you may want to terrorize them, but you don't have an intent to injure them. But let's say you have an intent to injure them also. So if these guys had the intent to injure or to terrorize, they would not have thrown the grenade under their feet. And by the way, the police report says Artur Movsesian, I just remembered his last name, Movsesian, dropped the grenade in front of his feet. This is the police report. Now, we have to pay attention to the word drop. Drop means you drop in front of you something. To throw means you take a swing, the way you do a baseball, right? You throw a baseball or you throw a grenade. So in this case, he didn't throw, he dropped it. And he dropped it in front of his feet, and he was the most injured. Part of his lung was removed because he had injuries to his chest and to his feet. So he's recovering now in the hospital. So this is, as I said, self-sacrifice, and it was very obvious from their statements that they did not intend to terrorize anyone. They were asking for attention, and they had their demand. Their demand was to release the people who were arrested, who were trying to go to Taush for the resistance. And of course, in their demand, they were demanding Nikol Pashinyan's removal or his arrest for being a traitor. That was one of the demands also. So this is the story on this, guys. And as I said, the whole government media and the whole machine was trying to demonize National Democratic Alliance by, first of all, claiming that this was a terroristic act, and second, by associating the movement with those three individuals, by claiming that it was the movement that has orchestrated or has directed those individuals. The movement, as I said, is a fluid body. It's not an organized thing. Yes, we do have a board. And yes, I am a board member. But I found out, just like all the other board members, and there's 8 of us right now, we all found out about this from the TV and from the newscast. We had no prior knowledge that they had any intention. And to prove that point, when we realized who they were by watching TV, we realized that they were our supporters. And the young guy, not what is or Arthur, but Stepan. Stepan was the young guy. Stepan was friends with one of our board members' son. Armenak Gürerian, board member, his son, Areg, is friends with Stepan. So when we realized that was Stepan, we had discussed with Armenak, in other words, the board had a quick meeting, and we discussed with Armenak, and we came to the conclusion that Armenak should go to the site of the standoff and should convince Stepan to put away the grenade. We called immediately Armenian Police Department. They said, yes, please send him. We'll wait for him. Armenak was on his way, and 10 minutes has passed by, and the police stormed Stepan and disarmed him. Now, I have a right to have suspicion that that was done on purpose at that time, in order for Armenak not to reach, so that National Democratic Alliance could not be given the credit for disarming the situation. And why do I say this? The videos are very clear. Stepan has been standing there for 2 to 3 hours. For 2 to 3 hours, there were, and by the way, when you watch those videos, you realize how unprofessional the Armenian Police Department is. They're talking with him. I mean, if he's a threat, right? If he has grenades and you believe that he is unstable, because that's what they announced officially. They officially announced that Stepan was an unstable person, that he was mumbling things. They couldn't understand what he wanted. They couldn't understand what he was demanding. Meanwhile, we have the recording where it's clear what he said. Guys, stay away, police. We're not here to harm you. We're going to harm ourselves. This is what he said. So if the police were fearful of their life, they wouldn't act that way. I mean, you have someone, you have someone who is a threat to you, you would be more careful and you would not act. And if nothing changed in those 2 to 3 hours, they could have disarmed him the same way 2 hours before than what they did. And he didn't have to drag on for 2 to 3 hours, if that's the case. So I have the suspicion they did that so that our board member, Armenak Gürerian, could not reach there. The important part is where we left off, is this whole drive to label those 3 guys, and of course by association also the National Democratic Alliance, as a terrorist organization. So the question is, first of all, is that true or not? Because if it's true, then I guess they deserve to be labeled. But if it's not true, then you want to ask the question, why are they trying to label NDA as a terrorist organization? First, I already started on the first part of the question, the answer. It's not true. This is not a terrorist act. It's not a terroristic act. And I already started explaining why, because a self-sacrifice is not terrorism. You may, as you know, in many countries, suicide is punishable by law. So self-sacrifice, if it's suicide, you may punish them for their act of committing suicide or attempt to commit suicide. But you cannot punish them for terrorism, because for terrorism, there has to be a victim other than yourself, and it has to be very obvious that there are victims. It has to be very obvious that they're being threatened. There is an imminent threat to their life that they're being terrorized. And when I was trying to draw the parallels back in 2016 with Sasna Tsrer, I was directly involved with getting the public opinion, and not only the public opinion, but opinion makers at the time to talk against Serge Sarkisyan's regime or attempt to label the guys terrorists. Because on July 17th, there was a police chief of police named Hunan Bogosyan, I think, or Hunanyan, something like that. He, on 17th, he came out and said, oh, this is a terroristic act, blah, blah, blah. And when I heard that it's a terroristic act, the first thought that came to my mind was that they were trying to label the guys, or they were trying to build up the public opinion against Sasna Tsrer as terrorists. And the reason why this is done, because if you want to act upon someone by suppressing their rights or by arresting them, first you have to, when there is no crime, first you have to demonize them. You have to create the impression that those people deserve to be punished because they're bad, because their color is not right, they don't speak right, they're gay or whatever. So you have to demonize them in a way before you can punish someone who doesn't deserve punishment. This is the other thing. They don't deserve it, so you have to create the impression that they deserve. So they were trying to label Sasna Tsrer as terrorists, and they started with Hunan Bogosyan, who was the first one who came out and said that. So what did I do on the 17th and 18th is that I called every single prominent person that I knew at the time. I'm talking about 2016. And of course, Serge Sarkisyan was in power. The Republican Party was in power. And then the Nikol Pashinyan and many others were in the opposition. So I called every single opposition parliamentarian, including Nikol Pashinyan, and asked them in their own words. Of course, I gave them a few points, legal points. As a lawyer, I could explain why this is not terrorism, that this is a revolt, an uprising, that a distinction. And I asked each one of them in their own words to do a counter propaganda, so to speak, because the government machine was working on a propaganda to label them as terrorists. So we had to counter that by explaining why they were not terrorists, and you had to bring examples, such and such. So Nikol Pashinyan was very enthusiastic, and he actually did that. And there are videos of that at the Papazergund, or the police station that the guys went into. Nikol Pashinyan comes out and says, Sasna Tsrer, he says, are not terrorists. I know them personally. They are nationalistic, good people, honest people, so on and so forth. I couldn't have said it better than what he said. He is a very good, he has rhetorical good abilities, as you know. And each individual that I contacted, be it human rights advocates, or like Sakuns or somebody else, and I contacted everyone. And I have to say that everyone had agreed to do that, and each person did it in their own way. And it was successful. It was successful to the point that on the 19th, the second day after the takeover of the police station, CivilNet, the TV's, the YouTube channel or the internet news agency, called me up and they said, Mr. Yagnukian, we would like to take an interview from you. And they wanted to do it in English and Armenian. CivilNet has an English thing. And I said, look, I left the house on the 18th. They arrested me and they let me go 6 hours later. If I come out of the house again, they're going to arrest me again. So they said, no, we'll send a taxi. We'll send our reporter with you, with them, and the cameraman. So in case the authorities try to abduct you, we will film it and so on. So I said, fine. They came, they picked me up with a cab. I went to the CivilNet offices, which is in the center of the city on Northern Boulevard. And I gave the interview in English and Armenian. And in that interview, so that to be more comprehensive for lay person to understand the distinction between terrorism and an uprising or a revolt, I gave the example that it would have been a terrorism, I said, if those guys, instead of going into the police station, they went to the mall, the Dalma Mall, and put grenades in the garbage cans where they would detonate them, and innocent women and children, and not only women and children, men also, innocent bystanders would be injured or killed. That would be terrorism. I said, these guys didn't do that. This was an example. Why did I bring this example? Because in 2018, right before Nikol Pashinyan came to power, Serge Sarkisyan did another staged thing because he was trying to resurrect the Sasna Tsrers as terrorists. So he claimed, or his police department or national security claimed that they just caught a gang of terrorists who had planted bombs or were planning to plant bombs at the Dalma Mall. So I'm in my jail cell, 2018, few days before the so-called Velvet Revolution of Nikol Pashinyan. I'm hearing this on TV and I'm saying, oh my God, I said, you know, they took my words from 2016 and now they creating this false flag operation where they're claiming that there are terrorists who were going to blow up Dalma Mall. But what made my suspicion that this was a staged false flag operation, and it was directed towards the Sasna Tsrers, was when they showed on TV recording where the investigator is asking the so-called terrorist, why were you doing this? And that would-be terrorist responds by saying, I wanted to help the Sasna Tsrers. So right there, Martin, they're associating 2018 so-called terrorists who are going to blow up a mall with Sasna Tsrers, and he's not saying why he wants to support, how is that going to support by blowing up the Dalma Mall, how is that going to help Garo Yernukyan, who is in a cell, who is being accused of supporting Sasna Tsrer's acts of taking hostages and taking buildings. Because
and this individual had no connection with
no connection whatsoever. And by the way, that case, nobody knows whatever happened to that case. Nobody knows because the police department or the national security never talked about this again. So it's a closed case. We don't know what happened to this guy, but it's obvious that it was staged. And you know, the association, I don't know what caused the Serge Sarkisyan at the time to try to resurrect that, but at least one thing he understood that Nikol Pashinyan does not understand or doesn't care. Serge Sarkisyan understood that he could not put the charges of terrorism on Sasna Tsrers. So they refrained from that. So what does Nikol Pashinyan do in 2023 or 22? They changed the law and they label now under the new law of taking hostages as a terroristic act. So automatically or retroactively, the acts that in 2016 under Serge Sarkisyan were not considered a terroristic act until so-called democratic or the Nikol Pashinyan, who expressed his opinion that Sasna Tsrers are not terrorists publicly. Now, through the back door, he's passing a law that retroactively would consider taking hostages or taking buildings as a terroristic act. So they snuck in through the back door, the terrorism again. So what is he doing now? But I was saying that Serdar Sarkisyan was at least was smart enough not to do that. And one of the reasons why he didn't do that, at least this is what some experts are saying, is that it would have been a negative impact on tourism in Armenia if you admit that there are terrorists in Armenia, or that the act of Sasna Tsrer was a terroristic act. You know, a foreign tourist just sees that as a headline. It's enough for them not to come to Armenia. So some people say, I don't know if it's true or not, but some people say that one of the reasons, besides the one that we had such a strong resistance towards that, and I became the victim of that resistance, because they knew, they were hearing my phone conversations, they knew exactly that I was behind that whole act of anti-propaganda, that is not terrorism. That's why on the 19th, they arrested me, and I'll get to that, because there's such abnormality with my arrest that it's incredible. But coming back to this, that Nikol Pashinyan doesn't understand, Nikol Pashinyan doesn't understand that if he claims this act of three self-sacrificing people throwing a grenade in front of their feet, if he calls this terrorism, imagine the CNN headlines. He doesn't realize this, that, look, why are you doing this? Now, I'm sure the experts at the State Department, Pentagon, or the embassies in Yerevan understand very well, because that's not a terrorism. So they also understand why Nikol Pashinyan is doing this. And so this brings to that question that Nikol Pashinyan is actually exposing himself as being someone who makes concocted cases, he makes cases, he claims false things, doesn't do his promises, doesn't deliver on his promises. So this has already become very obvious, not only to Nikol Pashinyan's sponsors of Putin and Erdogan, but also to the Western leaders, such as Macron, who claims that he thinks of Armenia more than Nikol Pashinyan does. This is Macron's words. And that's obvious that, yes, that's true. France thinks of Armenia more than Nikol Pashinyan does. The French ambassador just last week brought up against one more time that the issue of Artsakh is not resolved, that the Artsakh Armenians cannot return to their land, to their home, and they have a right and they must return. Now, this is the French ambassador saying this. Meanwhile, Nikol Pashinyan wiped off his hands and said, Artsakh is Azerbaijan, that's it. Forget about it, we don't want to talk about it. It's a closed book. So it becomes obvious who is more concerned of Armenian interests, the French ambassador, Macron and Biden, or Nikol Pashinyan. So that's as far as this whole terrorism thing. Now, they arrested me on the 19th of 2016, July 2016. And this is the funny part. I say this and I laugh. Now, I'm accused of aiding and abetting Varujan Avetisyan, and they naming a specific person's name, that I aided and abetted Varujan Avetisyan in taking hostages and taking buildings. As proof, and again, quote unquote, as proof, all they have is, and this is in the court record, so I'm not, saying this out of this public record. All they have against me is 5 phone conversations that they recorded legally. Why do I say legally? Because they also have recordings that are done illegally. And I'll get to that illegal part too. So these 5 recordings of phone conversations, 3 were with my wife. And 2 were, one was with my future in-law, and present in-law. He wasn't an in-law at the time. and with Varujan Avetisyan. One phone conversation with Varujan Avetisyan. Varujan Avetisyan tells me over the phone that, Garo, it's better that the people, instead of gathering at the opera, they should come here to the police station, because by their presence, they would prevent bloodshed if the authorities decide to attack. So in a way, Varujan Avetisyan is thinking of preventing a bloodshed. And for that, he's saying that people are better come to the police station so they can act as a shield between the police and the rebels. And the police will not attack the thousands of people. And by the way, in those days, there were about 20 to 30,000 people. So that was a guarantee that there will be no bloodshed. So this they portray as aiding and abetting in taking hostages and taking buildings. Now, any normal person with any logic could see that there is no correlation there. But fine, let's give that to them. What's funny, is even funnier, is that Varujan Avetisyan is not charged with holding hostages. But I'm charged in aiding and abetting Varujan Avetisyan for taking hostages. So when we ask in court to the judge or the prosecutor, how would you explain that? They said, well, on the 19th, well, Armenian law says that if you give up the hostages voluntarily, then criminal charges of taking hostages cannot be brought against you. So it's questionable whether, first of all, there were hostages or not, because that's also questionable. There's a lot of legal background there that would claim that there were not hostages, because if their movement was not restricted, they were not threatened, then they would not be considered hostages. That's the rule. And there is argument there that they were not restricted. But let's say even though if there were hostages, but if Varujan Avetisyan releases them, and he's not charged for holding hostages, then how can Garo Yevnukyan be aiding and abetting Varujan Avetisyan? Here's the nonsensical answer of the prosecutor. He says, on the 19th, when we arrested you, there were still hostages. The hostages were released on the 26th, but that was after we arrested you. So when we arrested you, there were hostages, and you were aiding and abetting in holding the hostages at the time. So the law that decriminalizes the act if you voluntarily give up does not apply to you. So I jokingly told the prosecutor, I said, well, you should have waited until the 26th and arrested me then, so you wouldn't have to put that stupid claim. Anyway, this is how funny that thing is. But as you know, the trial goes on, and what our people, our public, for the most part, is unaware that we are not free. It's just that the pre-trial detention, in other words, I was held in prison for 22 months, unjustifiably, because the only time they can hold you in prison by law, if there is suspicion, and you have to prove that suspicion, if there is, and the government has to prove that suspicion, the prosecutor, if there is suspicion that if I'm let free during the pre-trial, it's on bail or on a signature not to leave the country, is that I will not escape. That's one. That I will not tamper with evidence, number two, and that I will not influence the witnesses, number three, witnesses or victims. Now, in my case, there were no material evidence against me. 5 phone conversations, which I did not deny. So there's no argument there. I'm saying, yes, I made those 5 phone conversations. Takes 20 minutes to hear that. There was no evidence against me. There's no testimony against me. There are no witnesses against me. There are no victims. However, all my real estate which is worth over $1 million in Armenia, is held on a lien, which not only prevents me from selling them, and this is already 8 years, mind you, but I'm also prevented from improving that real estate. For example, I wanted to build a canopy. I went to get a permission. They won't give me permission. So I have a choice not to do it or to do it illegally. And they want you to do it illegally because that gives them a chance to take a bribe. And that's how the system works here. And nothing has changed as far as that is concerned. They make your life difficult to do things legally. And there's only one purpose why they make you life difficult. So that you will be fed up. You will say, okay, how much do you want? Take this much. And I've suffered because of that. You know, years ago in 2012, I refused to give a $30,000 bribe, which was semi-legal bribe because they called it the Yerevan Fund. I wanted to construct a building and they wanted 30,000. I said, no, I won't give it to you. They went down to 10. Imagine this is semi-legal. I refused to give that also because I refused to give that semi-legal bribe. We've been in court for, 12 years already? 3 times we went in circles because I'm the ones who's suing them. I'm saying I didn't give it a bribe, so you have no right not to give my permission. So finally I won the 3rd time, and now the marshal has to subject the city hall to give my permit. They still not, I have a court judgment. The court says, give Garo Yahrugan the permit, and the city hall still doesn't give the permit. So I have to go to the marshal so the marshal can enforce the judgment. This is the absurdity of the situation. So coming back to my case, when 2018, so-called Velvet Revolution happened, where Nicole was saying Sasna Tsrers are not terrorists, and he actually signed with 40 other parliamentarians and prominent members of the community a petition in order to release me on bail. He was one of the people who signed, Nicole Pashinyan. In 2018, well, when he signed, it was during Serge's time, and they didn't release me. The same judge kept saying that if we release Garo Yahrugan, he may escape to the United States because he is also a US citizen. And it's absurd because there is a list of people who can travel. And every time I travel, I have to show my US passport and my Armenian passport. The Russian KGB agents who sit at the Zvartnots airport, as you know, they have in the computer my name, my photo, my fingerprints, everything is there. There's no way I can escape. The only way I can escape if they put me on a Russian military plane at the 102nd Russian military base, and they smuggle me out of the country in a different route. There is no other way to leave. So that whole thing that I may escape, or I may influence the witnesses, or I may tamper with evidence, none of that is existing. So in 2018, the same judge who for 2 years, after numerous motions by me to release me on bail, he wouldn't release me with those concocted excuses. And then in 2018, all of a sudden, the same judge turns into an angel and says, oh, no, it's not a problem. Mr. Yagnukian is a prominent member of our community. He's an honest, blah, blah, blah. It makes me sound like I didn't know, was it a toast that he was saying in court, or was he telling the truth? So anyway, they released me on bail, by the way, on the highest bail amount in Armenian history until that time. It was something like 25,000 US dollars, 10 million rubles. And after that, only about a year later, the next highest bail was Serge Sarkisyan's brother. Sashik Sarkisyan was, I think, instead of 10 million, it was 50 million or something like that. But anyway, at that time, mine was the highest amount. So I paid the bill and I was free during the pre-trial. And also the ban of my movement was lifted. So I traveled from 2018 till 2022, at least 10 different foreign trips. United States, Europe, Japan. So I traveled a lot, because after being jailed for 22 months, you want to enjoy the freedom, so to speak. So I traveled, I returned to court. I never missed a court date. Not one single time because of me was a court session adjourned because I wasn't there. So I was a good citizen who did his part. And then all of a sudden, in 2022, me and my wife were at the airport traveling to Dubai. And I'm at the airport, I'm told by the FSB, the Russian KGB, who are at the airport checking the passports, that I can't leave because there is a restriction, that I'm on the blacklist, so to speak. I'm going, why? I was removed from the blacklist. When did this happen? So listen to this. The same judge who released me, let's go back. The same judge who for 22 months would not release me, who then released me, I became a good citizen in his eyes. The same judge in 2022 decides to put the restriction back on me again. However, he does two things that are illegal. Number one, he did it without having a court session, because the law requires that restrictions, removal or replacement, or placing the restriction or removing the restriction, has to be done in court. He has the option of asking all the participants of the court whether they agree to put the restriction or remove it. And then after the judgment is made or decision is made to put the restriction on, he has to notify me. So let's say even if I wasn't in court on that day, the court is obligated to notify me. So not only that decision was made by the judge without having a court hearing, he did not notify me because I found out at the airport when it was already too late. So it caused financial loss. I paid for the airplane tickets for two people. I lost that. I paid for the hotel for 1 week, lost that. So this is how this corrupt system, and by corrupt, people only think that it has to be a bribe. No, corrupt happens when Nikol Pashinyan tells the judge to release Garo from pretrial detention, and then he tells the same judge to put restrictions on Garo Yevnukyan. And this is exactly what happened. I was released from pretrial detention by a direct order from Nikol Pashinyan when he came to power, even though he claimed that it doesn't influence judges. And then by the direct order of Nikol Pashinyan, my travel restrictions were put on place. Made a number of motions, didn't work. They keep denying, and their denial is a one-sentence, nonsensical, illegal answer. The answer is in Armenian, I'll say it in Armenian, then translate in English. Նպատակահարմար չենք գտնում ձեր բացակայությունը Հայաստանից. Նպատակահարմար means we don't see it not feasible. What's the word? Նպատակահարմար. It's not in the best interest of it's not in the bench interest to have you be absent from the Republic of Armenia. What's the best interest? Whose best interest? Why it's best interest? No explanation, even though the law requires, just like in any country. Armenian laws are not bad. We do have certain holes, but overall, the laws are not bad. The problem is that the judges and the courts do not abide by the same laws that they have accepted. So the law says you have to give an explanation for all decisions. They don't give an explanation. And that's how they play.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time again.
Again.
before we depart, something else happened recently, in that there were raids at the homes of the members and supporters of the NDA, including your
including
home.
my home, yes.
Yeah. So if you could just fill us in on what happened, what are the grounds for this, and where are we going from here?
Well, that's the continuation of the demonization process. So when you're creating a demon, you also have to show that that demon deserves what you did. So they came to about 40 followers or members of the board, actually almost all board members, and about 30 something other active supporters of NDA. They came to our house, by the way, and again, they did something illegal. Now they have a court order to come in, but they want you to open a door first, because their practice is you open a door and they come in. The law says that you have to present the court order first. So he's telling me to see the court order. He's holding it, 10 feet away, and I'm supposed to see it through a pinhole, what the court order says. I tell him to pass it on under the door, and of course he's not passing it on. So then they claim they're going to break the door, so on and so forth. So I really didn't want to bother with it. I opened the door because I knew they're going to do it anyway. So they came in, they searched, and what did they take from the house? By the way, whatever they're taking from the house, they want to show it later on as evidence for the planning of terroristic acts. This is their whole motive. And this is what they took from me. They took my phone, a very dangerous weapon for terrorists. They were going to take my computer, but then I don't know what happened. They decided not to. So I'm talking to you on a computer now. They took away a vest, a military vest. Not a bulletproof vest, but a military vest where you can put your bullets and
similar to something a hunter would wear.
Right, exactly. And by the way, that vest, for their information, was the last sample, and it was my son's, who actually volunteered to go to the war in 2020, even though he didn't have to, because he was born in the US and he didn't have to become an Armenian citizen where he could become a conscript, but he did it voluntarily. So that was the only sample left. Why do I say the only sample? Because during the war, with my means, I manufactured about 1,500 of those vests. And I had those vests delivered to the front line, to our volunteers and soldiers. So this is the thanks that you get. And this is the only sample that was left. They confiscated it as, I don't know, proof of what? I have no idea. They also confiscated metal plates that I bought from Russia, those for the bulletproof vests. I was experimenting with ceramic because the ones that I bought were metal. They were not as good because I had tested them at the military polygon or site, and the bullets would penetrate. The automatic rifle bullets would penetrate those Russian bulletproof metal plates. They were not good. There were Armenian locally made ceramic plates, which were much better than the Russian plates, but because of corruption, because they could make money on buying it rather than manufacturing it locally, the poor guy who manufactured them in Armenia, he couldn't sell them to the Armenian military. So I started experimenting with a hybrid plate, which was part ceramic, part carbon fiber. And I'm sorry, Kevlar. I bought Kevlar for that purpose. All this, by the way, what I'm talking about, happened during those 44 days of war. So I bought Kevlar. The Kevlar was shipped to me from China. Kevlar is very expensive. I know, to give you an idea, 50 meters of Kevlar by 1.5 meters wide is $2,500. But Kevlar does make the breastplate much more effective. So anyway, this thank God that he didn't understand what Kevlar was, because he was in my garage. Otherwise, they would have taken that Kevlar also as proof of terrorism. So to answer your question,
you're divulging some information that might not be good for you right now.
oh,
they might be back for your Kevlar.
I don't care. They can come back. I'll give it to them voluntarily. It hasn't been used because the war ended and we ended. As you said, our time is up.
Unfortunately, our time is up. There is yet so much more to talk about. I really hope we can have you back on as a guest on Armenian American Perspective.
Sure.
Garo, once again, thank you for joining us, and happy Easter to you all, and until we meet again.
Thank you. Thank you also. Happy Easter too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.